A World War II veteran from St. Louis began his journey to France this morning. Fox 2's Mike Colombo met him at Lambert Airport and brings us the story.
The old Army veteran could hardly sit still. Today meant the world to him. He was finally going to reunite with old friends he hadn't seen in years, and just one long flight stood between them. At the airport gate, he was asked to show his confirmation. Jack pulled out his phone, swiping through screen after screen, trying to find the digital ticket. A nervous feeling started to build as he came up empty. The noise of the busy terminal only made things worse. The airport crew had seen this kind of thing before, so they stayed calm as Jack kept scrolling. He could feel people behind him watching, the soft chatter making it clear they were getting impatient. Jack's hands moved faster, but his chest felt tight. Where had he saved that ticket? Why couldn't he find it now? After several tense minutes, Jack looked up and told the staff he couldn't find it. He asked if they could check their system to confirm he had a reservation. The attendant said they still needed proof of purchase, but agreed to take a look. After a quick search, she frowned. There was no seat under his name. Jack insisted there had to be a mistake, but the staff explained they couldn't let him board without his name in the system or a valid ticket. Politely, they asked him to move aside so others could be helped. Still gripping his phone, Jack stood near the side, flipping through every app and email, trying not to lose hope. A kind staff member noticed his struggle and came over to help. Together, they dug through every possible folder. The airport buzzed around them, and people kept glancing over, curious. Jack barely noticed. All he could think about was that long-awaited reunion now hanging by a thread. Then, out of nowhere, it hit him. Jack froze, then let out a quiet, sheepish laugh. He suddenly remembered what had happened. He'd gotten distracted while booking the flight a few nights ago and never finished the payment. In his rush to get everything ready, he'd completely missed that step. He turned to the staff member and admitted what happened. She couldn't help but smile and shake her head gently. Jack felt awful once he realized the mistake. He hadn't actually bought the ticket the night before. He'd gone to bed thinking everything was set, never realizing he'd missed the final step. Now here he was at the airport, empty-handed. He couldn't believe he'd come all this way without a confirmed ticket. What made it worse was that this little slip-up might cost him the reunion with his old Army friends, and the chance to give the talk he'd been preparing for. The thought weighed heavy on him. Stuck and unsure, Jack didn't know what to do next. Going back home without seeing his buddies felt like a punch to the gut. He stood still as people rushed past him, his mind spinning with options. Should he keep pushing or admit it was over and go home? The thought of quitting made his stomach turn, but nothing seemed clear anymore. He just knew he had to try, even if hope was slipping away. As Jack wandered through the noisy terminal, it all started to feel symbolic. The loudspeaker announcements, the rolling bags, the crowds moving in every direction. Strangely, it didn't stress him out. If anything, it reminded him who he was. He'd gotten through worse. This wasn't going to break him. If there was even a small chance, he'd chase it. All he needed was a way in, anyway. While he was still figuring out his next move, the helpful staff member came back and suggested checking for other options. Maybe there were standby spots or last-minute cancellations. Her willingness to help gave Jack a small spark of hope just when he needed it. She seemed to understand how important this trip was to him. She promised to check and hurried off. When she returned, though, the news wasn't good. The flight was completely booked. There were no open seats. Jack's heart sank. That tiny spark of hope flickered out as quickly as it had come. Now the kind staff member had to move on. Other passengers needed help too. She gave Jack a quick, apologetic smile before vanishing into the crowd. Jack was left standing in front of the same attendant who had dismissed him earlier. She spotted him still waiting there and sighed, clearly annoyed. They were used to older travelers getting confused, but this man seemed stubborn and was holding things up. It was clear they were growing tired of the whole situation. One of the flight attendants stepped out from behind the counter and walked straight up to Jack. She placed a firm hand on his shoulder and tried to guide him away. "Sir, you don't have a ticket. You can't get on this flight. You need to leave," she said sharply. "I understand, and I'm really sorry," Jack replied, his voice steady but pleading. "I just need to be on this flight. Please, there has to be something you can do." "There isn't," she replied, her tone flat. "No one can help you. It's time to go," she added, leading him a few steps away from the gate. But Jack wasn't ready to give up. He quietly returned to the area near the desk, not in the way, just close enough to keep an eye on what was going on. He knew that sometimes passengers didn't show up, and he was willing to wait until every single person was on that plane. The attendants gave a heavy sigh but ignored him, hoping he'd eventually get tired and leave. After all, how long could he really hold out? Still, Jack wasn't done yet. He had one last idea, one final shot that might just work. With a deep breath, he pulled out his phone and made a call. On the other end was his daughter Angel, who just happened to know the airline world better than most. He explained everything to her, laying out the whole situation and asking if there was anything she could do to help. The attendants nearby overheard the call and rolled their eyes. In their minds, it was pointless. What could his daughter possibly do? But to their surprise, Jack's daughter had news that would change everything. What Jack didn't know was that Angel was actually the pilot scheduled to fly that very plane, and she was just arriving as he made the call. The moment Angel reached the gate, everyone froze. The same attendants who had brushed Jack off earlier suddenly went quiet, their faces going pale. They recognized her instantly. What they didn't realize until now was that Angel had recently been asked by the airline to keep an eye on staff behavior. Complaints had been piling up, and the company wanted someone trusted to help figure out what was going wrong. Unfortunately for the gate crew, it seemed they'd just shown their worst side right in front of their evaluator. The flight attendant quickly rushed over to Angel, stumbling over her words as she tried to explain. She insisted they were only following company policy. After all, Jack didn't have a ticket, and there was no way to let someone on a plane without one. Unless, of course, he happened to be the pilot's dad. Angel acknowledged that yes, they had followed the rules, but then calmly called them out for the way they treated him. Huffing at an elderly man who simply made a mistake and was asking for help wasn't acceptable. "How would you feel," she asked, "if it were your own father standing here, being spoken to like that?" That question said it all, and the attendants had no comeback. Angel turned away from them and immediately worked to make things right. As it turned out, a passenger hadn't shown up and a first-class seat was available, just waiting. Without wasting a second, she got her dad checked in and brought him to the gate. Jack could hardly believe it as he walked toward the plane, this time beside his daughter. At the aircraft door, the same staff member who had helped him earlier stood waiting with a kind smile. Jack paused to thank her sincerely and told Angel how much her kindness had meant through the whole ordeal. Walking through the cabin behind a friendly crew member, Jack felt the atmosphere shift. There was a quiet buzz, like something was about to happen. Then over the intercom, Angel's voice filled the plane. She announced that this was a special flight for her, not just because of the route, but because for the first time she'd be flying with her father on board. She proudly introduced him as a veteran who had served the country with honor. Heads turned instantly, passengers craning to see who she was talking about. What followed was unexpected but deeply moving. A spontaneous round of applause broke out. People clapped, smiled, and called out words of thanks. No one had known that Jack had once been selected for a bravery award, but even without that detail, their gratitude was real. The moment was full of warmth and appreciation, a little celebration that said more than words could. As the applause slowly faded, Jack made his way to his seat, his heart full. First class never felt quite like this. It wasn't just the seat, it was the sense of pride, of being seen, of being honored in such a simple but powerful way. As he finally sat down and looked out the window, Jack took a quiet breath. What a journey it had been, from near defeat to a moment he'd never forget. Being flown by his own daughter was the icing on top. And in that peaceful, grateful moment, it all sank in. Sometimes life really does surprise you in the best ways. But just when Jack thought the surprises were over, another unexpected moment was waiting for him after landing. The 10-hour flight had been long, and given his age, it wasn't something he looked forward to. So when the plane finally touched down, Jack let out a quiet sigh of relief. As he stepped off, several passengers gave him warm waves and smiles, and he smiled right back. Their kindness meant a lot. He made his way into the airport lounge, looking forward to seeing his daughter again and grabbing his bags. As he sat in the lounge, resting and waiting, a young man approached with a bright, welcoming smile. Jack looked up, curious. The young man introduced himself as Mason Dio, and the last name rang a bell in Jack's mind. Mason reached out for a handshake, and just as Jack was about to take it, Mason shared something that stopped him in his tracks. Mason explained that Jack had once saved his father, Moses Dio, during their time serving in the Army. His dad had told him the story more times than he could count, always with deep gratitude for the man who had saved his life. Jack's expression changed as the weight of the moment settled in. He had no idea this meeting was coming, and now he sat listening to heartfelt thanks that had been carried across generations. Though the years had blurred some memories, Jack clearly remembered pulling Moses out of danger during combat. He hadn't forgotten the bond that moment created. Mason, standing in front of him now, said he had always wanted to meet Jack, to say thank you in person. Without Jack's actions that day, Mason said simply, he might not even be here. His father had always spoken of Jack with deep respect and appreciation. As Mason went on, sharing stories and little memories passed down from his father, Jack sat forward, soaking in every word. He was eager to hear more about an old friend and brother in arms, but then Mason's voice grew softer. He told Jack that his father had passed away recently. The joy of the moment shifted, still meaningful but now tinged with sadness. Jack sat quietly, taking it in. Despite the loss, Jack felt thankful for the moment. He was grateful to have met Moses' son and to hear what his actions had meant to a family. Mason explained that he was heading to the veterans' reunion himself, attending in honor of his late father. What was supposed to be a trip they took together had become Mason's tribute to the man who raised him, and to the man who once saved his life. Jack, deeply touched by Mason's words, gently offered his condolences. He thanked the young man for coming forward and for sharing something so personal. Just as Mason was about to step back, Angel appeared, walking briskly toward them. Without saying a word at first, she wrapped her arms around her father in a warm, relieved hug. When she heard about Mason's plan to attend the reunion for his dad, she didn't hesitate. With her schedule wide open for the next few days, Angel decided to join them both. At the reunion, Jack surprised everyone. When it came time to accept his award, he didn't speak about himself. Instead, he chose to dedicate the honor to Moses, Mason's late father, and to all the fallen soldiers he had served beside over the years. His words were simple but powerful. Mason stood quietly, holding back emotion. Though he still missed his father deeply, this gesture from Jack, surrounded by other veterans, brought comfort and pride. For Jack, it was also a moment of reflection. He silently promised himself he'd stay better connected with the friends he had left. Hearing about Moses had reminded him just how precious those bonds were, and how easily time could slip away. As the event continued, Jack, Angel, and Mason stayed close, sharing stories and laughter with others at the gathering. There was something special in the air, an unspoken understanding, a connection that didn't need explaining. Jack looked around and quietly appreciated the path that had brought them all here. From one mistake at an airport to a heartfelt reunion, it had all led to this moment of shared history, healing, and gratitude. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are more true stories ahead that remind us how powerful kindness, connection, and a little persistence can be.